Okay, so this is the last video. And in this last video, what I would do is, if you still don't understand anything, please send me an email, ask, come before or after school. But this is the last final review that we really have. So let's get into the problems. As you can see, this first one, it's a division of polynomial problems. Because it doesn't have a number in front of the x, I'm going to use synthetic division. So for the synthetic division on this one, first I choose -5 because that's the root of this thing. And then we just go through and we write down the numbers. So 1, 18, 80, 65, and -50. From there, we're going to draw a line. The first number is always dropped down, so we can have a number to take this and multiply right here. So that'd be -5. When we add, that's 13. Then I get, I think, -65. Then I get 15. And then I'm going to double check so I don't mess this up. -75, you get -10, which ends up giving you +50. And that gives you a remainder of 0. Then we have to figure out what to write down. Well, this, since it started out as a 4th degree, will be 1 lower. So that's x to the 3rd. That's 13x squared. That's 15x. And that's -10. And we have a remainder of 0. So it looks like my answer would be A. Let's try the next one. So it wants us to write a polynomial in standard form given the zeros, -1, 3, and 4. So if you have the zeros, what you want to do is write the factors. So the factors that we have would be x plus 1, x minus 3, and x plus 4, or x minus 4. They're always opposite of what the roots are or what the zeros are, so the factors are just always opposite. And then what we would want to do is multiply this out so that we could get it in standard form. So now we're just going to distribute. This will go to here and here, which will give me x squared minus 3x plus 1x minus 3. That would give you x squared minus 2x minus 3. Now we're going to distribute again. So that's going to go there and there. This is going to go here and here. And that's going to go here and here. So let's distribute through one more time. We're going to get x cubed minus 4x squared minus 2x squared plus 8x minus 3x plus 12. Now we're going to combine like terms. So we're going to get x cubed minus 6x squared plus 5x plus 12. And this should be my final answer. Let's see if that's one of my choices. And it is. That would be B. Okay. Just make sure when you're doing this that you change your zeros to factors and then you just multiply through. So this one we're graphing. So the first thing I want to do is I want to find my roots to know which one it is. So we have one root, we have one root which is -1, so it's right there. We have one root at 0, which is there, +1, and 2. So as that would come in, that would be like -2, which that works. This is written the wrong way. 1 minus x is not how we write things, so that one's gone. Okay, let's check the next one if they have our roots. So there's our +1. There's our 0, good. There's our -1, good. And there's our +2, good. So that one has all of them. This one is missing an x. Like it's missing the 0, so that one's not good. And this one has our x, so it might be good. So these two are the same, except for this one doesn't have a negative out in front, and this one does. So we're going to decide right now if this thing starts up or down. So how we're going to do that is we're going to figure out all our signs. So if you plug a negative number and you square it, that becomes a positive. If you plug a negative number and don't do anything to it, it stays negative. If you plug a negative number in here and you don't do anything, that stays negative. If you plug a negative number into here, that doesn't do anything, so it'll stay negative. So then we do this. A positive times a negative is a negative. A negative times a negative is a positive. A positive times a negative is negative. So when you multiply these things out, you get a negative. Well, that means if I get a negative, this thing should have started down. But this thing started up. So it can't be A, it's got to be C. So the big thing on these graphs are find the zeros. It'll probably narrow your choices down. And then after you find the zeros, go through and decide if this thing starts up or down. Let's do the next one. Okay, so what they'd like us to do is sketch the graph for this problem right here. The biggest problem is that we can't necessarily graph it in this form right here. So because it's in that form right there, we need to change it so that we can kind of graph it. So I'm going to write this down, and then we're going to kind of think through it. So that would be negative x cubed minus 3x squared plus 4x. You can see on this that they all share an x, so I'm going to factor out an x, which that would give me, I'm actually going to factor out a negative x since there's a negative in front, which that'd give me negative x squared plus 3x minus 4. And you can then see that this thing would factor into x plus 4 and x minus 1. Because 4 times negative 1 is negative 4, and 4 plus negative 1 is 3. So we need to find the graph that kind of goes through all of these points right here. So when I look at this, I'm going to find out their roots. So their roots for this would be 0, negative 4, and 1. And it looks like my best option for that would be either A or E, because this one kind of goes through negative 4, this one kind of goes through negative 4. It looks like it goes through 0 right there, and then back down through 1 really quickly, and that does the same thing. So we just have to decide if it's A or E based on the starting point. Well, this, if you plug a negative in, and you times it by a negative, or the easier way is to kind of think of it like this. There's a negative, and you plug a negative in. So we get a negative and negative. That'd be negative, and that would be negative. Well, negative times a negative times a negative times a negative. If you multiply all those out, that gives you a positive. So the thing should start up. So E would be my correct answer. Let's do the next one. So now we have this one. I'm actually not going to graph through everything because they all have different zeros, so I'm just going to find what its zero should be. So when I look at this, I can see right here that we have a 0 at 0 because x is just 0. X minus 3, well, that would be positive 3. And x minus 2 would be positive 2. So my zeros are 0, 3, and 2. That would be D. And we can see that the graph does that if you zoom in on it. Okay, let's try the next one. Okay, so we need to graph this point. So you can see that the point is right there. So let's talk about what it is. On the x-axis, it goes positively because it's coming towards us. 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to put 3 for my x. On the y, it goes to the left, so that's negative. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's a negative 4. And on the z, it goes up 1, 2. And that's positive because it's going up. And that's my point. So you just kind of look where everything crosses, and that's how you get your point right there. Let's do the next one. Okay, so we're going to use the discriminant to find the answer to this. First thing you want to do is get this thing in the correct form where it's equaling 0. So to do that, we would have 9k squared equals 12k minus 4. I'm going to subtract 12k on both sides and get 9k squared minus 12k equals negative 4. And now I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So I'm going to get 9k squared minus 12k plus 4, and that equals 0. So now we have this. So now that we have this, we're going to think about how we'd figure out how many solutions it has. Well, this I really wouldn't want to factor. I'd probably want to put it in the quadratic formula, but because I need to know how many solutions it has, I don't need to know how many, like what the answers are. So the only thing I really care about is that square root part going to break down, which means it would have a negative number? Is it going to be 0, which would positive and negative would be the same, or is it going to be positive, so it would have two answers? So we're just going to plug in that portion, which b squared would be 12 squared, which is 144, minus 4ac. Well, that would be 9 times 4 times 4. Well, 9 times 4 times 4 is 144. 144 minus 144 is 0. 0, a positive 0 is the same thing as a positive 0, and a negative 0 is the same thing as a negative 0. So our answer would be 1 real rational solution, because 0 is our answer, and 0 being positive is the same as 0 being negative. Let's do the next one. We want to know, is x plus 4 a factor of this? Well, how we could check is we can use synthetic division. So again, what I would do with the synthetic division is I'd put negative 4, because that's its root, in there. And we have 8, 33, negative 4, 1, and 4. We always carry the first number down. So that'd give us 8. So that'd be negative 32. We add them together, we get 1. Multiply. So I get negative 4. Add them together, I get 8. Or negative 8. Just going to double check all my math to make sure everything has gone right so far. So 8, negative 32, 1, negative 4, yep, negative 8. That then would be a positive 32, which would give me 33. And that's going to be a really big negative number when I multiply this out, which would be negative 132. You add it with 4, you get negative 128, which means this thing has a remainder, so it is not a factor. Okay, so which solution matches this? Well, the first thing we want to do is solve this to figure out what they're talking about. So I'd subtract 5, get 2x is greater than 2, divide by 2, divide by 2, x is greater than 1. Which, if x is greater than 1, it's an open dot and it's going this way, which c is the only one that starts at 1 and goes to the right and has an open dot. Try the next one. Okay, this is an and statement. Essentially with an and statement though, you just solve the two things. So we're going to solve the two things. I'm going to add 4 to both sides and get 2x is less than or equal to 8. Divide by 2, get x is less than or equal to 4. Subtract 5, get x is greater than or equal to 2. So we have to find the one where x is greater than 2 and less than 4. If I did that right. So, I don't know how they got 6. Oh, it's because I can't add. So, 4 plus 8 is 12, and 12 divided by 2 is 6. There we go. So we need to find the one that is greater than 2 and less than 6, which this is greater than 2 and less than 6. So B is the final answer. Let's go to the next one. So in this one, we need to figure out the graphs of the two. This one right now is throwing me off because it's not in the right form. So let's get it in the right form. We can do that by subtracting 2x on each side and getting y is less than or equal to negative 2x minus 4. And now we have this. So this one would start at 4 and be shaded down. And this one would start at negative 4 and be shaded down. Well, I don't even really need to see the lines. They didn't draw the lines in these, but I didn't need to see the lines because there's only one where they're both shaded down. See how this is shaded up and this is shaded down? That's not going to work. This one's shaded up and this one's shaded down. That's not going to work. These are both shaded up, so that's not going to work. These are both shaded down, so that's the correct answer. Let's look at the next one. It says, find the value of the discriminant, then describe the number of roots for each one. Well, basically, we just need to describe the answers for this quadratic, and so anytime you need to find a quadratic that has a number in front of the x squared, you can't factor it, so you're going to have to plug in the quadratic formula. So we're going to get 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 times 6 is 36, minus 4 times a times c all over 2a, which is 6. Well, now you're going to get 6 plus or minus the square root, and then I don't know what that is, so I'm going to pull out my handy-dandy calculator, and we're going to see what that is, which is 36 minus 4 times 3 times, those aren't times buttons, times 3 times 2, and that's 12 over 6. Now, 12 is going to give me two answers, and 12 is not a nice square root. So it's obviously not a perfect square, because that is not a perfect square. It is greater than 0, because this is greater than 0, and it is not a perfect square. That is true. So B is the right answer. It's not less than 0. It's not or equal to 0. So it's not one solution. It is going to be two solutions. It's just going to be two solutions. And it will be irrational because that is not a nice square root. Okay. If you have any questions over any of the days or anything that we did, just let me know.